Perfect.
Thank you all for joining us again. You know, we heard a lot yesterday about binational collaboration and how communities, states, and others, private sector and public sector, can work together. I think to start, what are the most promising areas for binational infrastructure investment along the US-Mexico border, and how do both countries align priorities to help move those projects? So Secretary Black, we'll start with you.
All right.
We'll reverse order, and then we'll go back the other way in the second round.
I think some of the areas where there's unique opportunities right now. One is, from New Mexico perspective, it's Santa Teresa, and expanding that crossing. I know that the Bridge of the Americas is going to have to go through some repairs, and I believe 2027. We should be working to make sure that we're not negatively impacting traffic as much as we can, and where there's opportunity for us to offset some of that shift, we need to match the infrastructure with our partners in Chihuahua at the border and expanding that border crossing. We're investing heavily in developing a trade port and at the Santa Teresa area. So all of Doñana County is a foreign trade zone. So by building out that infrastructure, we think, and in partnership with that supports cross-border traffic, we think that is another really important opportunity. But I would argue one of the biggest pieces is power. Right now, we don't have a grid that can work both ways across from Mexico and the US. I know El Paso Electric does provide emergency support if there's an emergency demand requirement. But I believe that if we could create a better grid across, it's going to be both for efficiencies, redundancy, and environmental stewardship would be better for everyone. So that's something that I would see long-term, very, very valuable. And then finally, I know we'll be hearing from Sempra later today. We believe in New Mexico, we believe we create the cleanest barrel of oil and natural gas in the world. We've set very, very strict regulations on our natural gas production. We'll be certifying that gas as clean natural gas in the next month, have a voluntary certification process. We think an infrastructure where we can share that clean gas to support the transition and ensure energy stability would be very important as well.
Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
So I think we've been pretty much on the same topics. It's like we're expanding our border crossing. We have a great collaboration with the state of Texas. We are not connected with the state of New Mexico. We love to collaborate with the state of New Mexico. But I think that the biggest collaboration when it comes to infrastructure is like border crossings. But the second right now, and the one that has the biggest potential for Mexico, besides water, I don't want to touch on water because it was yesterday's topic, so we'll talk about that later. But I think infrastructure, when it talks about electricity, we have the projects that we see in economic development, the projects that are coming down the line. I met last month, I was in Taiwan and meeting with a Taiwanese company, and they told us that produces servers, and they told us the power necessity that they have for this project is 1.6 gigawatts. And I'm like, so is there a city in the world that has that? And there was like none outside of China. So I think like the biggest potential for collaboration is energy generation. So what we have in the state of Nuevo León, we have a lot of pipes. So Sempra saw them yesterday, but we have a lot of pipelines coming down of like natural gas. And with the new energy reform that the president of Mexico is pushing to open up like self-generation, the biggest opportunity is power generation based out of gas, and also because the data centers and everything around the data centers and infrastructure needs that they have is like, so right now we have about $4 billion of projects of data centers, but altogether they need about like 300 megawatts of like power. So this is power that is currently not in the grid. Even though Monterrey is a distribution center of electricity, we have 1,000 megawatts of surplus, but it's still like a high tension. So it's actually faster, more efficient, and better and low cost to actually get it out of gas power. So we can use South Texas, like low cost gas to generate like power generation and then power all the new data centers with AI. So which is, I think, is going to drive the economic development and the economic investments for the next 2-3 years at least.
Great, thank you. Carlos, is the state that has more ports of entry than anybody else on the border. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, 34 ports of entry and soon to be 38 with the 4 new bridge projects that have been approved. So first of all, thank you, John, for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. They took my three most important things. So first, transportation, and then I am going to talk about water.
Yeah.
But first of all, talking about transportation, you know, like you said, Texas handles 70% of U.S.-Mexico trade. I mean, that's just crazy numbers. So that means that our ports of entry are always under pressure, especially with nearshoring from states like Nuevo León and population growth in the border. Population growth has increased since 2000 to today. Crossings have increased 65%, so we need the transportation mechanisms to, you know, keep up with that. And Texas noticed this, and we've made historic investments in infrastructure. First, since 2016 to today, our TxDOT border districts, 3 of them, El Paso, FAR, and Laredo, we've increased their budget allocation by 340%. Second of all, just last Thursday, the Texas Transportation Commission, and I know Commissioner Meade is here, they approved the Unified Transportation Program. This is our 10-year transportation program, and they gave it a $146 billion budget. This is mainly for congestion relief projects, again, because of the increasing population and also because of our thriving economy. And then third of all, during our most recent legislative session, Senate Bill 1, I know Senator is also here, Senate Bill 1 gave a $40 billion budget for highway investment and maintenance. So those are just a few of the examples that, you know, Texas is investing in infrastructure. But I think infrastructure doesn't stop at the border. We need to collaborate with Mexico, and we have a couple of ways to do that. First of all, at a more federal level, we attend the Binational Border and Bridges Crossings Group in Mexico City, which was a few months ago. And there, we ensure that all border states, Mexico and the US, are on the same page when it comes to building bridges and expansions. Just in the last 2 years, like I mentioned at the beginning, we've advanced 4 bridges and 3 expansions. And then at the state level, we have institutionalized collaboration mechanisms with the Border Trade Advisory Committee. So my boss, Secretary Nelson, chairs that. And right now we're working on the Texas-Mexico Border Transportation Master Plan, which has been a model, not just in states in the United States, but also in Mexican states. And this was originally released in 2001, and now we're kind of doing, 2021. And now we're kind of doing an update to add USMCA, nearshoring, and supply chain new realities that, as you know, the political world is changing every day, and we need to adapt for those things. And in this plan, we work with binational regional working groups, and there's 6 across the border, which include Mexican and Texas authorities, so that Mexican input is implemented from the beginning. And then finally, just to close, I think water, of course, is a really big thing. But our border communities need reliable water systems. And I've had the privilege to work with Commissioner Janeka. He invited me to be a part of the negotiation, I would say, for the new minute in the 1944 Water Treaty, so Minute 331. And I think one of the big keys of this minute is that it gave Mexico and the U.S. projects to work on together. So I think minutes like that are crucial, because right now we're working on projects together for desal, for water reuse, and for irrigation modernization, and to secure supply for both countries.
Yeah,
Carlos,
go ahead.
I just want to clarify something. Did you say $40 billion for transportation?
That's just SB1, and then the UTP is $146 billion.
So I feel like the sad stepchild over here. I was proud about my $50 million for transports, and he's throwing billions out. That's fantastic.
Just a couple extra zeros. You know, each of you mentioned energy, water, and transportation. Those are all critical in driving development. How can public-private partnerships be used and structured to benefit your economic development growth? Maybe I'll start with Emmanuel at this time, and then we'll come back to it.
So we have a lot. So for example, when it talks about border trade, so we got 2 permits for expansion on the border. One of them we're doing it as a public-private partnership with a company out of Austin called Green Corridor, which is a high line that will define and change the way the logistics works. It's an elevator, kind of like metro lane that actually brings containers. So when we talk about trade and all the ports of entry we have with Texas, from Monterrey, every day we originate 25,000 trucks to Texas. And from Texas, from all the ports, they get to like everywhere in the U.S. And so basically, Monterrey and Dallas are the 2 distribution zones of like North America. So like from there, like most of the trade goes through those parts and then express everywhere. So like, and for that, there is no way we can build like roads fast enough. So, or enough roads to be able to keep the demand. We have brought in more than $75 billion of foreign direct investment. Those are factories that they're being put into production right now, and they keep adding more volume and more volume and more volume to the transportation. So I think one of those things, we need to think outside the box and be more efficient of how we create new projects for transportation, for sustainability, and start thinking it was like right now, the biggest downside is like we don't want trucks to be sitting 4 hours at the border. All it takes them 4 hours to cross is like the most unsustainable thing. And we bring companies from all around the world that have 2030, 2050 like ESG goals, like carbon neutrality goals, and like having their cargo and their exports sit at the border for 4 hours is definitely not sustainable. So I think like right on spot with Carlos is like working together on creating new alternatives of like transportation. Like we're starting to test like electric trucks at the border. We want to start testing with Aurora and with Tesla and with other companies like autonomous driving trucks at the border as well. Because if you can replace, and we talk to CBP all the time, if you can replace a driver out of a driving truck that crosses the border, that's 1/3 less risk for the CBP trade group. So that is like less time, and there is no reason to have a driver sit on a truck when you can have driverless trucks. So I think like working in collaboration with universities, with different companies to try to start testing. So we're also testing pilot programs of driverless trucks all the way from like Highway 1 all the way down to our Columbia port and then into Texas. So I think just working and start thinking outside the box is like right now with the whole thing that's going on with the drivers, it's a shortage of drivers everywhere. So I think just start thinking about more like creating innovation and technology into different sectors, as transportation is one of them.
No, that's great. Secretary Black, same question to you, water, energy, transportation, public-private partnerships?
On the public-private partnership side, I think, you know, our principles about how we think about that are really looking at local hire commitments. You know, whenever we're looking at a public-private partnership, what are we doing on skills training, pipelines to make sure that those local hires can happen, and we've got a group of folks that can activate that, and then aligning that with our environmental metrics, and making sure that we're taking care of the community as we grow. But I think one of the things that government sometimes forgets is that in order for a public-private partnership to really work, and the best place is to get to a triple bottom line, but the first one is businesses have to make money. And sometimes we forget that, and that's a good thing. We want our businesses to make money. So it's really about, it's got to be good for business, good for the community, and good for the environment. And so that's how we then think about it. We do have brand new authorization language around specifically public-private partnerships in the Trade Ports Bill. So this year we will be designating the geographic scope of those trade ports. My office does that. Once that's done, it opens up, again, my piddly $50 million, but to partner with private sector to build out infrastructure along the border and to do that through public-private partnerships. And that's a new thing there. One other place in our state that has specific authorization for public-private partnerships is the Border Authority. and there are unique funding mechanisms, whether that's toll roads or other types of things, that we could partner with infrastructure development to create those public-private partnerships to expand infrastructure. So I think those are some of the areas where I see, in particular in New Mexico, that we can leverage that private sector to help drive infrastructure investment.
Thank you. Carlos?
So I think for public-private partnerships to work, they have to have transparency and they have to be balanced. Aside from money, which making money, like you said, is key, I think that it's important for them to have these two things, because sometimes, or a lot of times, projects lean too heavily on one side of the border or only benefit one sector of the community. So I think for them to succeed, they need to have three things. First, I think they need to go beyond the ribbon cutting. They need to have long-term commitments and maintenance, so not just building the project and walking away. Second of all, I think they need to include the community. Ask the people what they need. And also, they need to see the benefits, whether it's jobs, whether it's safer crossings or cleaner air. That means engaging with the residents, hiring locally, and then making contract and performance data public, because transparency really builds trust. And then third of all, they need to share the risk fairly. The private organization and the public organization need to both have skin in the game, so that when conditions change, projects can survive. And I think that's where NADBank plays a critical role. They help de-risk projects. So, having a NADBank involved is crucial. Every new bridge that I mentioned at the beginning that is being built in the Texas border is a public-private partnership. So that just shows, they're really working. The 4-5 bridge in Laredo was the first one, working along with Webb County, and more recent one, Puerto Verde. They're working with Maverick County. So, like Emmanuel said, you need to build bridges almost every day. By the time a bridge is built, it's already almost obsolete. So you can't just do it as a government. You need help from the private sector to keep those infrastructure projects going.
Yeah, totally agree with what you said. 75% of all ports of entry were built pre-NAFTA. Mm-hmm. So think about that, and then you look at the increase in traffic and trade between Mexico and the United States. It continues to increase. So they're saturated, like you said, and government can't do it all. And so, those are some of the things that I'm glad you all talked about. Emmanuel, you hit on something: pilot programs, use of technology, AI, the driverless trucks. Can you expand a little bit on that? And then I'll ask each of the other panelists as well to talk about kind of what their states are doing that are innovative and using technology to help with the infrastructure development or reducing wait times or increasing water.
Well, we're using, so we've been working a lot on AI, and we partner with NVIDIA, and we're announcing a partner with NVIDIA. We created the AI cluster in Monterey that involves the 12 CTOs of the 12 largest companies in the state, in collaboration with the 4 deans of the 4 largest universities. So that actually is kind of like a think tank where, with NVIDIA technology and with Oracle and with Microsoft, we're trying to develop so one of the things that we're using for this AI model is we use an AI traffic prediction model that we're using. So one of the projects, so we know Monterey we're the fastest growing city in Mexico. We add 150,000 people per year to the state. We've been adding 20,000 migrants to the state that actually got working visas and stayed in Monterey that were actually coming to the U.S. And half of the population of our universities is from outside the states. So last year alone, we added 400,000 cars, new cars to our car, to the pool of cars. So now we have 3 million cars, and we have 3 million people, active population. So we almost have 1 car per person that is active population, working. So the biggest problem is how do we use technology to enhance this, or to start developing models to do prediction or traffic or something like that. And one of the things that we created is we're working with the with the private sector into changing their schedules for the factories and for the biggest companies. So if you have a company that has 10,000 employees, if you change their schedule by like almost an hour, like from like starting at 7 a.m. to like 8 a.m. or like 6 a.m., like that reduces traffic by about 35%. So that model, that prediction model, is something that we're working constantly with all the companies to see how we start piloting this program in some of their areas, because I mean, it's not sustainable. It's like there's no way that we can build enough roads like in 1 year to cover 400,000 new cars that just got put into the metropolitan area. So using technology for like AI allows to do prediction models on that, and the same thing with traffic. Like our Monterey to Laredo road is almost like a parking lot now. Like we flew over yesterday by it, and it looks like a parking lot 24/7. So a day, a night. So there's not enough ways to like. So we need to figure out and start thinking outside the box. How do we start doing things? And that's what we start thinking about. Maybe Highway 1 is like not used as much. We can start mapping it with like autonomous driving and start like testing autonomous driving there, because there's not enough traffic there. Yes, a little longer, but I mean, no one is going to be driving it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works. So
that is an interesting project. Secretary Black?
So I think much the same in the sense of we're looking at really digitizing the process in Santa Teresa of crossing and looking at trade flows, working with New Mexico State University to do that, those AI analysis on that. I think it also is, we move more cows than people, honestly. And there is a unique opportunity there as well to look at how we do that efficiently and how can we do that better on the climate side. Many of you know that cows burp and fart, and that is a lot of methane. And there's a lot of waste. So how do we manage that in a way that reduces those impacts through efficiencies? Those sort of modelings are things that we're working with New Mexico State University to support. But I think, is that collaboration then bridging over to the Mexico side? Mm-hmm. And is there that coordination? I think that's a place where we really are missing some opportunities, is to both empower both sides of the border so that we're working not just in cooperation, but in collaboration, because that's, I think, where we really start to get those efficiencies. And so that's a place I think it's both a challenge and an opportunity for us to deeper leverage those partnerships.
Mm-hmm. Carlos, technology, AI?
Yeah, I think technology is a backbone of modern border management, and without real-time data, we're making billion-dollar decisions without seeing the full picture. Mm-hmm. So I think that the real value of technology is that it lets us anticipate problems instead of react to crises. I think by improving interoperability, we unlock efficiency and build trust. For example, whether it's synchronized custom systems or integrated traffic monitoring, even building drought models and sharing them for the Rio Grande, it helps a lot in planning for crops and for other stuff. So I think that's important. And we've already seen an example of this with the unified cargo processing. So for those that don't know, that's where CBP officers and Mexico SAT officers, so basically IRS, jointly inspect cargo, sometimes even within the same booth. And this eliminates duplicate inspections, and it's already cut processing times by 50% and costs by 60%. So that's the model we should be working on. Two things that I thought as clear opportunities would be aligning U.S. and Mexico systems. Case and US already flows and wait times, and then aligning that with VUSE in Mexico, the Ventana Única, that would give brokers and carriers one playbook instead of two. Mm-hmm. And then more on the state level, the Border Trade Master Plan, which, like I mentioned, is something big we're working on, and the Regional Border Connectivity Network, creating shared dashboards that track delays, safety, and resilience. That would be key to direct funding where it's really needed. At the end of the day, better technology and better data sharing means safer roads, faster trade, and smarter investments on both sides of the border.
No, I think that's great. And all three of you hit on these topics, right? There are these opportunities, but there's also challenges. And how do we come together to collaborate to overcome some of these challenges? I mean, Secretary Black, you talked about, Santa Teresa and working on the Chihuahua side. Emmanuel, you talked about Route 1, trying to get it to Laredo. And then once it gets to Laredo, everything backs up. So the two customs, I know that's been proposed. So with these proposals, how do you push them forward? I mean, are there other relevant actors that can bring people to the table? Are there conveners? I mean, I'm just trying to think how we can help push some of these and resolve some of these issues.
Well, I do think convenings like this are really important. I've had amazing conversations over the last couple of days, building those networks to continue that. But also we do now, New Mexico has staff in Chihuahua. We'll be opening up an office in Mexico City this fall. We're hoping again to lean in on how we build that collaboration. But I would argue we need to be setting up some joint cross-border working groups. From our perspective, what we've talked about, and I've talked about with my counterpart in Chihuahua, is a multi-pronged set of working groups. One focused on marketing, where I can be more flexible in hiring folks and representatives in Taiwan, because we have staff in Taiwan as well. They don't have the flexibility to do that. But it allows, I can partner with them to enhance our marketing for the region. That's one aspect, market the region as a unit, especially when we're looking at foreign direct investment. And then the second part is working groups that really focus on that deploying infrastructure dollars integrated to each other. Because if we build a 12-lane road and they build a 6-lane road, it's not really going to work out well. Mm-hmm. But I don't think historically New Mexico's been very good at that sort of engagement and partnership, and it's a place where we want to be better and better partners.
I think Emmanuel Lu has an office space for you in
Yeah.
Monterrey.
You don't need to go to Mexico City. We put one in Monterrey for you.
Carlos, do you want to answer? Then we'll go to Emmanuel.
So I mean, that's a perfect example. Putting offices. We have an office in Monterrey,
Yes.
and also one in Mexico City, the State of Texas Mexico office. And you might think that the main one's in Mexico City, but it's actually in Monterrey. That's where the actual team is. And again, we do things with Mexico, but I think looking at the infrastructure, we decided to put it there for a reason, and all the business that's also coming to Monterrey. And I think forums like this, of course, but I think like the ones I mentioned before, the BBBXG, so I know both of their states are part of that. That's key, like you said, because sometimes the U.S. will build a certain bridge and the Mexican side didn't know about that. And that can be trouble and a lot of dollars wasted. So I think forums like that, and not to brag, but forums like the Border Trade Advisory Committee. At that committee, we bring the 4 border states, and then we have binational regional working groups, like I said, that bring in the Mexican side so that they can also give input, even though it's our money, our everything. But we also need their input to make sure we do a good job and to make sure that they're going to do the reciprocal on the other side. So I think those are great examples.
Emmanuel?
So I think going back to a few things that were already mentioned. So one of them is the unified cargo processing. I don't think for us it has made a completely different way of operating cargo. Like it reduced like border crossing to like 10 to 15 minutes. Because like if you sign up for the program, if you sign up the suppliers, and then you get more companies to actually sign up to the program, more logistic companies to actually work with both authorities on being more efficient on these aspects, it has changed everything completely. Like we have, and also like knowing about the different programs that CBP has. Like for example, it takes us one email to have like open the border after hours, and it costs like less than $200. Before that, some of the automotive companies in our state used to be like charter planes, like get things to like Detroit. It was like now they open the border for us like at any time, so it takes like it costs very little compared to like a charter plane, and it creates lots of efficiency. And then going back to what Secretary Rob, that you are also very invited to open your office in Monterrey. It would be it would be better than Mexico City. But one of the things is this whole nearshoring, this whole relocation of suppliers. So we do a lot with Texas, and for example, we have a lot of companies, we have an automotive company out of Austin, and I don't want to mention a name, but 49% of all the suppliers for the two biggest selling models are in Monterrey. So 49% of those auto parts come from Monterrey. Then we work with a lot of heavy machinery companies that are based out of Texas, that we're relocating all the suppliers from Asia, from all around the world into Mexico to supply their Texas facilities here. We're meeting later on with another company from England that is also in heavy equipment, that we're helping them on relocate suppliers. So, and also finding these things that companies can share similar suppliers. For example, I brought in a hydraulic company, hydraulic engine company from China that is set up in Monterrey now. And now they supply Caterpillar, John Deere, Manitoba, Bobcat, the whole industry. So and that's just one company. When they came here, they find out, I can supply actually 40 different customers from Monterrey. So the same thing we're doing with Polaris, Kawasaki, CF Moto. We had 3 manufacturing facilities that all produce ATV vehicles. So we're okay, you guys need to start sharing suppliers. We need to start doing supplier development, and we need to start integrating Mexican suppliers so you guys meet the USMCA rules and you can actually export trade free. So and that has been, I think, and I say this on lots of forums, but it's the first part of the USMCA got signed 30 years ago, with the original NAFTA. But then 30 years later, with the nearshoring and COVID, 4 years ago, the Chinese told us, hey, listen, Mexico, you always had the biggest consumer in the world next door. You weren't supplying it, so we had to supply it from around the world. And you always been there. You share a 3,000-mile border with them, and this is the perfect opportunity. And I think with the tariffs, is the even perfect opportunity to actually supply that. So we're doing a lot of supplier development, developing Mexican suppliers to be able to supply the industry in the U.S. and having to be less reliable on Asian suppliers and the substitution of importations from Asia and developing suppliers. Because sometimes, in the day-to-day operations, and just on automotive, we have $5 billion on supplier development projects that we're doing now. And then on home appliances, we have $3 billion of supplier development projects that we're doing now. But it's the problem is the buyer and the seller, they literally cross an email. It's no, I don't make that product. But then when you bring both of the owners of both of the companies, be hey, listen, would you be interested in developing this project? It's going to cost you $5 million of additional equipment, maybe $1 million of additional training, but it's a $25 million PO. Will you be willing to do that? And then the owners of the companies make a different determination, be yeah, I want to invest and develop that supplier because I can supply the whole industry with just that small investment. So, but then the normal buyers and sellers don't actually have that conversation about supplier development. So that's kind of where you gotta go up the chain to the C-level executives to start the work talking to them about listen, let's do supplier development, let's do Asian supplier substitution, let's do this program because Mexico's always been there, it's always gonna be the next door neighbor, and there's so much opportunity right now to be doing this development. So I think this can be something in collaboration between the U.S. and Mexico states, because there's a lot of things that Mexico's more competitive on. There's a lot of things the U.S. is more competitive on.
Maybe I should put an office there. No, I think that's brilliant. Absolutely, and I do think that's a role that the NADBank could play as well, is to help facilitate those conversations at a C-suite level. Because I think you're absolutely right. We're really trying to look at that both on the supply chain. What does that look like on the customer side? What does that look like so that we're creating that ecosystem for those companies that are willing to take the risk to invest in the region. But the more we can do that up and down part of it, the more success we're going to build. So I love that idea.
As Emmanuel was talking, Secretary Black, I know you all are trying to recruit manufacturing to Santa Teresa. Do you want to explain a little bit more for the folks that aren't as aware of Santa Teresa as some of us are?
So Santa Teresa is our inland trade port. area in New Mexico. It's the fastest growing inland trade port in the U.S. today. We've built out a really interesting intermodal space at Santa Teresa with Union Pacific, where it's one of their largest intermodal systems. And the beauty of Santa Teresa and New Mexico in that space is that we're equidistant between the Port of Houston and the Port of Long Beach. So when you need to get to the U.S. market, you can hit 75% of the population of the U.S. within 2 days from Santa Teresa. So it gives you, I think, a really robust opportunity. And then, we've got things there, everything from cables for your cell phones to cell phone parts to automobile manufacturing, and partnering with, again, companies on both sides to really build both sides of the border to build out that infrastructure. And it was just in the paper 2 days ago, where we were working with Doñana County on a $100+ billion revenue bond for a new data center advanced manufacturing campus that we'll be building at Santa Teresa as well. So it will be the largest capital infrastructure project in the history of the state. Wow. And it will be transformative for that part of, between El Paso and very excited about the opportunity there. And we think it's a great place for people to partner.
It's been an incredible panel. I really enjoyed moderating this to learn about the strategies and the investment and how you all look at things. We're coming up on time, so audience, and Carlos, we can start with you.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you guys invited me because transportation takes most of my job. So I think just we need to keep building. That would be my takeaway. If we are to keep growing, we need to keep building and doing it together. Yeah, I think that's my big one.
Thank you, Emmanuel.
I completely agree with Carlos. It's like, let's keep building like bridges, keep collaboration like happening. So I've been to Santa Teresa a few times to visit some of the companies, and I think the biggest opportunity there is to develop the local suppliers. Because right now, what Santa Teresa is looking on the Mexican side is like you import 100% of those products from Taiwan, and you assemble only the products. But when I went to tour their facilities, like the state-of-the-art facilities for the same companies in Taiwan, then you start thinking, it was like, but all this metal can be used Mexican metal. All these like mechanical parts can be used mechanical parts. All these, so like in these data centers, it's like everyone is talking about data, and like I met with 3 companies in Taiwan that are gonna sell over $100 billion each on new technology server units like GB2000s and GB3000s for NVIDIA. So these 3 companies are gonna sell like $100 billion. And when you look at the server rack, which is like $10 million for a server rack now for a GB3000, which is the latest generation for AI, you're like, start looking, and they're thinking about assembling here, and they're thinking of assembling somewhere in the US, and you start thinking like all these parts are already produced in my state. There's no need for you to bring like all your production. It was like utilize local suppliers. For example, all the server, half of the server is a water cooling unit, which is literally an air conditioning unit that runs through the servers. So that can all be produced in Mexico easily because we already have all the guys that produce those specific units. We have a company called Vertiv that produced the majority of the water chilling systems for those racks. So those are the type of collaborations that we can do with Santa Teresa, we can do with the other ports of entry, like the Samsung chips producing in Austin and the TSMC chips producing in Arizona. As soon as they finish production, they ship it on a plane and send it to Asia and do everything else in Asia, and then they end up in an NVIDIA server rack, and then they come back to the US. So it's like why don't we just like shorten, like these things travel on a plane like about 7 times before they end up a final product in the United States. All those things that can be areas of collaboration of like integration of supply chains like vertically. And that's the biggest opportunity that we have to collaborate between the US and Mexico. And I think these tariffs kind of give us that leverage to start producing, to start working on those opportunities as well.
Thank you.
Again, I 100% agree on that. Supply chain integration is really, really important. I know Jerry Pacheco down in Santa Teresa does that in New Mexico. So he has a list of kind of what are the inputs needed, and really shops that around to New Mexico businesses. But there's no reason we shouldn't be doing that more aggressively on it with our Mexico partners as well, because you're absolutely right. It makes us so much more competitive as a region if those products are produced in Mexico versus in Asia. I think for me, it's the takeaway is molecules and electrons. We need a lot more of both. We need the electrons to power the factories, to power the new electric vehicles, to power our grids. We need the molecules, both, I believe, of natural gas for that power, but also of water. And that is the future of development in the region. If we don't have enough of that, none of this other else can happen. So energy and water are going to be really key for the region's success. And if we don't do that well, there will be communities left behind.
Mm-hmm.
It says, and I mentioned this, I think, yesterday, but if it would be like with this digital revolution that's happening, and if we don't have the infrastructure to bring it to our communities, it would be like saying to the railroads in the 1800s, no thanks, we're good. Don't need you. We'll be fine without you. And you're left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And then you disappear. You become that ghost town. We can't let our communities miss this time, this digital time, because we're not willing to make the investments in the infrastructure needed.
Thank you very much. What a very insightful panel. I appreciate it. Thank you. For each of you, we have a book from 30th anniversary of NADBank, and we'll take a quick panel picture.
Just here for a minute.